Oh God, yeah. Well, that's
I'm really excited
mistake.
about that.
Are you kidding me? And my sister and I are laughing because I got my nephew hooked on it. And we do Christmas pajama day. Like we have the big New Year's Eve party. I mean Christmas Eve party, and everyone in the family that comes, it's Snappy Come Pajama Party. And then we just spend the day. Oh, it's the best. Everyone used to get dressed up. It's like why? But I said, can I go to the movies in my pajamas? Because that's where I'm gonna be. Okay, so let me just see. Okay. So, all right, we went over the norms. So what we will do is we will have 5 minutes. And if you wouldn't mind, Cheri, just setting the context for the lesson.
Okay, so the lesson that was taped is a lesson where the children have finished a projects that they have put together, that the purpose of their project is they're setting up museum exhibits to help inform and assess even people's ability to learn about cellular function, so all the organelles. And so they had to both teach and have a way to ask questions and be interactive. So that's pretty much it. It was the end of the unit that they were doing, and what was viewing is the celebration, pun intended,
So I was going to say.
that they got to really explore and share each other's projects. And in addition, they also are kind of doing an assessment and looking at what are good questions in that. And they had a form that they were filling out for that. And they also had pre-graded on a rubric their project.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, you have a copy of the questions that you wanted us to focus on?
I'd be happy to read them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so in what ways was I successful and unsuccessful in motivating and providing students multiple opportunities to engage in continued learning and clarification of vocabulary and concepts? My second question is, what evidence is there that students are benefiting from open conversation with each other? And in what ways did I facilitate this or hamper this from happening?
Okay.
And my third question is, how have students' questions become more challenging and thought-provoking? And are there other strategies I could use to encourage this practice?
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to start. I'm going to reset it because we're going to have 10 to 15 minutes. Start with 12. For the warm and cool feedback. Okay. Do you want to start, Chris?
Yeah. So
Thanks.
I mean, like, it's evident over there. Like, I loved it. It was very creative. Those, like, the projects. Like, I saw there was a puzzle, there was a diorama, there was a website. I mean, that website looks really interesting. It was just like, it seemed like there was. I'm not sure exactly what the assignment was, but it seemed like there was a ton of choice, and the kids really applied it to a strength that they had. It was really nice to see.
Yeah, I would echo what Krista said. The projects look amazing, that they came up with lots of interesting ideas, and it was clear to me, like you always start your lesson with the objective that's stated and the class states it with you, that it was clear as far as what you were looking for from the students in that class time.
I obviously commented on that as well. I also said that students clearly know the protocol and expectations. They were working so well with each other. One example was the girl in the yellow sweatshirt was so patient with the other. Oh, I just adored that. And just there were clear expectations that have been modeled and practiced clearly throughout the year, as evidenced by the way the children were in the classroom.
I thought there were a lot of really good review questions, and the students were actively quizzing each other like the whole time. Like they were going back and quizzing each other and asking that, and oh, do I know that? Oh, let me go look, you know.
And I liked how you restated and reclarified the questions and the directions when needed. There was one student in particular you brought up to the front of the room because he wasn't sure what to do, and you helped him with that. But I also saw you doing that multiple times with other students when there was any like questions, that you were right there to step in and help with the clarification.
I liked the accountable talk, and I believe, I mean, we'll see when we have the student work or the worksheet, but it looked like you provided sentence starters or some foundation for them to do the accountable talk, which really guided them. And it was evident because they were very familiar with it, which was nice.
Going back to something that Gina was saying about the routines, that was clear that were the routines. There was one point where you had a lot of instructions at the beginning, and I mean, I was watching it late, but I was like, I'm confused, but like the kids totally got it. So whatever routines you had, whatever instructions you had there, like the kids were not confused. They knew what was going on. So that was really great.
And it was obvious that whatever sheet you provided them to work on, that they knew what they needed to do. Like they knew they had to see multiple different types of projects, and that they had to do something with those projects. And that when they went to those places that they were like playing the game, or they were putting the puzzle together, or they were answering the question. So they were on topic. They were doing what they needed to be doing at that point. Discussing with each other the content, which is fantastic when you can get them to do that.
You comment on the positive things that the students are doing, and in a very tender way. You are very genuinely tender with those kids, and I think they really liked it. It was just a very safe place to be.
Yeah, I think two things that I saw in the classroom. There was care. Like the students had care. They took a lot of care with their projects, right? And also like they were having fun. Like the cell wrap. I mean, I love the cell. I used the cell wrap. So like, when I hear the kids start going, I'm like, yeah. That was great. It's just like again a nice community. It was great.
And you could also see through the interactions with each other that there was like what Gina was saying, protocol for them to interact. Like it was definitely, even one student was struggling with an answer. That one girl, I agree. I thought she was fantastic.
She was wonderful.
Was that the hint?
The girl with the yellow sweatshirt.
I'll give you a hint. It begins with P.
Yeah.
Today. Yeah, and it was great because like it wasn't like she knew she wasn't supposed to give the answer. She was supposed to help her to get to the answer, not just supply the answer. Which is, they're so quick to do that sometimes. It's like, oh, here it is, versus like helping them through the process. That's cool.
You handled the situation very well, because we all know that teaching isn't always pretty. And a student noticed a mistake on another student's project, and you just modeled that so beautifully and really, like it wasn't a very big deal. Like, oh, okay, that's great, you noticed, and you called the other one. Oh, it was just very, again, just so tender and accepting, like that's why we're here. And it was just a nice modeling for, this is what you do when things go wrong. And it was nice. It kind of warmed my heart, like, yeah, that's very good. And no one felt bad. You could tell there were just not bad feelings with it, which was nice.
Right, because it wasn't even, and what's the right answer? You said, and what do you think the answer is? And what do you think? Is that, did you mean to do that? Or, do you think they're right? Or, yeah, I thought it was great.
But I think that's important, because we have to teach kids how to sometimes handle a bad situation. They don't know. And
deal with that.
And that was wonderful modeling and walking them through that.
And I guess I'll just come back to the one thing that I also noticed was the variety of the projects, which I thought was really cool, because I don't think I necessarily have an opportunity in some of my projects to give them such a variety of choice that you could tell that they really took to it. Like, and I'm not sure how much you do project-based work, but it seems like it's something they're very comfortable with and they're comfortable owning. So they did it. It looked great. Can't wait to look through that.
I know, right? I have just one more that I love how you had the kids use the sticky notes and you told them to put it in the parking lot. I think that was awesome. But it was like, yeah, put that sticky note in the parking lot, and they really liked it, which was nice. And it made them remember that they had to do that. So I thought that was just a nice way to phrase it.
I mean, I just, like, the kids were engaged the whole time. I think all of mine have been said, but they were just engaged.
I would agree. And I don't have my bullet points are taken.
Yeah, mine are done as well. All right. So actually, we're a little bit more than halfway through, which is good anyway. So you want to start with the cool feedback?
Sure. So one thing I wondered is, as kids, so I wasn't hearing a lot of the accountable talk, and so that, whether it was going on and I just didn't get picked up by the microphone. So like I just wonder, like, whether whether they need to see modeling or something on the feedback and the conversations to each other. So I wonder how to make that, how to get them into that, because like they were so focused on quizzing each other. I don't know if they got to the other part.
And I wrote that down as well about like using the sentence starters. I didn't necessarily see them using them, but I wondered about, there were times when they were very focused individually on doing the work at the project, and you said, okay, you're working great by yourselves, why don't you work together? And you could tell they had the moment of like, and they like, I'm not sure what to do, or I'm not sure how to start or approach that. So it would be interesting if they had maybe, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what to do, but like I struggle with that sometimes too, when like you say, okay, you need to talk to each other, you need to work together, and then providing that opportunity to allow that to happen, even if it's like certain questions that they have to ask each other, like what was the best part of this project, or what did you think was the best part of this project, or what did you think needed to be improved? Some questions that might start that conversation. I don't know.
I put for a culminating unit, it seemed that there were still a few kids that really weren't getting it. So I was just wondering, you know, would you take that information and go back and reteach those kids? Or, I mean, I know sometimes it's hard and you just have to move on, like, well, we do get 80% of the kids 80% of the time, or whatever it is. But there definitely were some kids that were still struggling with it, I noticed. So I just was wondering kind of like, would there be follow-up on that?
Well, so here's a question. I don't know on a cell unit how to do this necessarily, but like a lot of the questions were sort of like had an answer, like had a one-word answer, like where's the DNA? It's in the nucleus, right? I wonder how to get them asking questions that are more application questions, or you know, different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And I can't think of how to do that for a cell unit. I think it's really tough in the cell unit because it's a lot of just you need to know what the nucleus is. But I don't know. Maybe if it was like a metaphor, like if they were asking like in Washington D.C. what would the, I don't know. That's a bad. I'm on the spot right now, but
I can't talk, right?
No.
Clarifying questions.
But no, I see what you're saying. What would, at the Washington D.C., what would the nucleus be? The
right,
president.
and why, and
right.
So that it's more than just
right.
You know.
Applying it, comparing it, and
Right.
making an analogy.
One of the things that I asked were like, you had said something about like questions and the questions you have, and I guess because I think it must be on the student work, so when we get to the student work you can clarify that part of it. I want to know what questions were they supposed to be asking or writing down. Like I didn't get that part of the directions as far as, because you kept saying write your question down, what are you supposed to be doing? Like I didn't get that, but I'm sure you can clarify for this and we'll see it with the student work. But
And I actually put that for a question for Wipro, is that making the papers that we hand out to the kids part of the pre-observation, because I also had that, and I just think if I had it
Yeah.
while I was watching, I'd be like, oh yeah, nice. I put, and this is just such a tiny little cool one because I love your tenderness and your positivity with the kids, but I put maybe instead of just saying nice job, focus on a specific task or behavior. And I know sometimes we just really want to encourage all the kids, but sometimes I think it may have a little more meaning if I said, oh, I really like how you like individualize it, maybe we're working on your handwriting or something, instead of just the blanket nice jobs, which we all do a lot anyways, but sometimes to make it a little more personal, it might have more meaning for them.
So the only thing I've got left is, I'm just thinking about the kids having difficulty like talking to each other. I wonder if they had to record like I said this to so and so and they said this back. If they had to document it, if that would push them more, because I feel like they were, trying to sneak through the crack there and not get noticed.
I had put that down as accountability. Like, how do we know they did what they're supposed to do? And maybe that'll show up on the student worksheets. I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
But like even like that discourse, like how do you hold, and that's just a big general question, how do you hold kids accountable for the discourse that they have with each other? And I don't know. Like, how do you make sure they're on topic?
Yeah.
And not like we're looking at the website, but we're talking about what happened, yesterday in gym class or something. I'm not sure.
And my last one also is one that comes up all the time because I battle it all the time. It's almost generational, like they just want the right answer. And it's like how do we get them to focus more on the process and the quality of the conversation where it's just like, what's the right answer? What's the right answer? And I don't know what the right answer is for getting the kids to value that process.
Yeah.
Did anyone have more cool feedback? Or? Okay, so now we can ask any clarifying questions about the lesson, and now you can answer, Cheri, during this time. So we're gonna have 5 minutes for this part.
So I'm gonna start with the warm and just say,
No, I think actually, I'm sorry, all right, so if there were any address, and then we can ask any clarifying ones after, that's fine. Go ahead, sorry.
So the routines and enjoying the kids, it's just part of what I regularly do, and sometimes I forget that. But it does really help glue things together. And I do really firmly believe in lots of choices because I feel like they value things more and they've gotten used to that. I'm really more focused on the cool feedback, so can I use my time as I like, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think it would have helped if I had them have to work with different partners. The two of the children that you saw that I tried to work together were looking like, I don't want to work with them, and I knew they didn't want to work with each other, and I wasn't able to quite bridge that. But if I had already, I do a lot of, you're going to work with this one, you're going to work with that one, how about you work with this? And so I didn't push it enough. I didn't say, and stay there. I walked away, and I forget the reason why, but I think you have to push them to that uncomfortable zone sometimes. And if I had said, you're going to work with one, and what I often will say is, you choose one partner, I'll choose one partner, or choose somebody who's your friend and somebody who's not your friend. And at this stage, I know who it is, so they can't play that. It's like, really, So I needed to really structure that a little bit more. There wasn't a necessity for them to complete the sheet to really engage with others. The only reason they had to really engage was when they were doing a game or just because somebody else was at the table with them. But there were some kids that I said, this isn't for you to do by yourself. You really need to talk. So I needed doing that a different way. I would, doing it again, I would do it a different way, and that would hold them accountable to listing whoever they've worked with. The quiz that they had prior to this, kids went one way or the other. Either they studied and learned the terms, or they didn't. So I had 1/3 of the kids in the class get A's, and 1/4 of the kids actually failed. That's a pretty high percentage to me to have kids fail. I usually, 1 or 2 in that DF range, and not always the same kids kind of, who didn't, but there was just a lot of studying to learn. So it was those kids picking up those kids in the project part, that some of them still didn't quite make it there yet, but there was a lot of them that were more than typically that were doing it. But there were other kids that said, we should have done, and even the special ed teacher said, I wonder if we did the projects first and tested afterwards how much better they would have been. She says, it's too bad that was a culminating, because she says, I feel like a lot of kids would have done better, but their scores on their projects were really good too. So it's like, okay, they already got that good score anyways.
And this is your first year doing this, am I correct in saying that? Because you've already adopted or adapted the standards.
Yeah, I have not taught life science for 8 years, and with different materials, different kids, everything.
So for your first time doing it, it looked wonderful.
Yeah. The 7th grade that typically does it does standard models only. So it's either 2D model, 3D model, no interaction needed. And I just felt like I wanted them to be engaged. I wanted them to have choices and be different and not all look the same. And they have different ways to do it. The children had options they had an option to work alone, work in partner, or work in group, but it had to be approved by their parents, whatever choice they made. And some kids did really well working on their own, and other kids' groups, it was really whatever they wanted.
There's only a little bit less than a minute. Can I just interrupt for a minute? Did anyone have a clarifying question that they didn't understand something for Cheri beforehand?
Can I just ask you to clarify about, so like what conversations you wanted them to have? Like ideally, what do you want to hear kids?
I wanted them to ask more questions that talked about future learning and not as so much review, and we didn't get that. I found that I got more review. Part of the paperwork they had to come up with a question that could not be answered in their project, but made them think about that. And there was some of that, but there was what I didn't do, what I should have was I expanded it to extra credit or something if they followed through with that on their own.
What did you mean by future learning? I want you to clarify what you mean by
So
that.
I wanted them to take what they learned in the class and then connect it to other learning and things. And some kids have.
So like,
Some kids do that naturally
how
anyways.
cancer cells different, something like
Right, right. Because this is it. That was the end of what I
Performing
taught for
function
life
kind of
science.
thing? Like why does this cell look like this and this cell look
Well,
like that?
they've done form and function. Another group did this, like you get one class here, so this is what, but I had this one class that did a whole city analogy and compared, so when you talk about one word, they were creative in doing that. There were some groups that did do analogies and weren't straight questions and were good thinking questions. This is a tougher class just to get to work. So I wanted them to really take what they've learned here and go out. I will tell you, a couple of them saw me leave with the box today. They're like, oh, where are you taking our projects? Who are you showing them to? Very, very excited.
Oh, nice.
So because they worked hard on them.
Yeah.
And they're gonna get to share them at a showcase later so other people will learn from them. But I wanted them to, I felt bad that was the end. You know, they're not gonna touch it again until 7th grade, and we don't do anything related with it. So I wanted them to not just drop it and put it in the closet.
Okay, so the next one, the fellows, including the facilitator and fellow being observed, so everyone, we're going to connect what we observed to the research article that is guiding the course of study. So did the lesson implement the research from the course of study and the science and engineering practice? How does the research help the group to answer the pre-observation questions? And how can the research inform this lesson if it were to be repeated again?
And this is from the video, correct?
Yes. Did you want to, who wants to start?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, so like, obviously there were lots of questions. And I think, like I said earlier, I think, like most of the questions that I heard were sort of like the review questions, like after that generate after the learning, and I go back to that the webinar about how can we use it to drive the next lesson like we were talking about, and just wondering how to, again, the cell. I teach cells and it is. Like basically the content is almost pure memorization. It's tough. So I don't know how I would do that, but. I don't know if that's is it a tough time to have all the questioning at the end of the unit? Like,
I think this was a culminating event, and I think it would have made sense to maybe put it in the middle and not have it be the end, and then have some kind of testing and review, or make it part of the review, and then have a formalized test. That might have helped to generate and follow through with more questions, because we didn't do anything else with those afterwards.
I think what Chris is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I was thinking the same thing though, is it hard, because this lesson definitely seemed like it was a lot of correct or incorrect answers, just like the whole, what you're actually teaching, so it was hard to, like, okay, we didn't hear the kids asking the deeper questions, or the, straight answer questions were what they asked most, but could you really have done it, even if it was done in the middle? I think this unit doesn't lend itself. Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas your bridge unit was just so many questions. I think if I was teaching cells too, I don't know how I would change it, because it's
the analogies
what does
work. When I thought about that. I'm like, when I did that, when I did the analogy lesson, I'm like, I should have taken this one. Because the analogies does allow for it more.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
but when I think about like questions where they can ask, where they know enough to ask a good question about like what would drive them to learn more, I'm not like it's so tough because cells, they haven't, like, at this point, my guess is, because your kids are same place mine are when they come into this, that they've heard of a cell, but beyond that, they have no idea what it is. And it's like, it's hard to like ask a question about, it's sort of like my lesson when I asked them to write down good questions before they read about their energy article. It sucked, you know, and like they had no idea. And then like as they learn more, they can tie it to connections. But I don't know if, I think it's so, I mean, I'm not saying it was, but I'm just saying it's tough, and there are certain things that are just a lot, it's like biochem in college. I feel like it's memorization, and it's so hard to drive that with questions. I don't know how to do that well.
And I don't do anything with process. This was it. Just introduce the cells and.
I mean, like they had a lot of questions in it, like, but it's so hard to. I mean, that's what. I'm harping on this just because I'm trying to figure out how to do this with my space, you know, and trying to do it well. And it's just, you know, it's.
You could, instead of maybe doing like we were talking about content questions, so maybe this is time for them to be more reflective questions, or maybe questions where they have to be like, okay, well, what was the hardest part about doing this project? What did you learn from doing this project? If you had to do this project again, what would you change and how would you do it differently?
I did have a journal reflections over there that they did about their project, and even before they did their project, they had a journal activity that they did where, when have you worked alone, when have you worked in partners, and when have you worked in group? They had to think about those times. What were the positives and the negatives? So they did that to help prepare to decide were they going to work alone, in partners, or in group. I asked them when they had done a project before, what was helpful before they did the project, what was helpful while they were doing the project, what was helpful towards the end of the project. So they talked about, oh, we're planning it. Yeah, you get to plan time. So they did those elements to help do the project. It wasn't science content, but it helped learn the science content. So they did do a journal activity that helped them prepare to make decisions on the project. What are your talents and skills? What are the things that you have difficulty with? So that they were already addressing those issues, so did not get in the way of putting it together. But that it's so hard because sometimes, you know, I love science, but I think I love teaching more. and you know, I look at what I get evaluated on, and I'm like, there's so many more important things I do that no one ever evaluates me. You know, like.
Do you teach just science to your 16?
I teach just
science. I wasn't sure.
But like, for example, we came back from vacation and their ticket out was simply to tell me about their vacation. It had nothing to do with science, but it had everything to do with their state of being and connection with me as their teacher.
Absolutely.
You know, like,
but
it was worth those 3 minutes at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
So some things are tough because it's like, well, you know, I don't have to do that, and no one's happy that I do that, but I know it works.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, like you said, and also like those expectations, like when they get together in those groups to talk, setting that and like modeling that, because you're right, they don't know how to do that. Like those two students, when they look at each other, you knew there was not going to be a conversation going on there, you know, but just modeling what to do in that situation is hard.
I would again, probably do a follow-up where they had to pair share and comment out, and they typically do that. I call pair share comment because they are actually, well, think pair share comment, but they already know they're supposed to be thinking because I accentuate that one. It's like you gotta be thinking, but they have to write the comment in a different color from that conversation, and it could be a comment either that they got from the person about what they said or something, you know, that they shared. So it doesn't have to necessarily be an evaluative comment on what they did. It could be something that they learned, but they need to show that there's some level of learning or understanding that has progressed in that comment. And they have to simplify it. It can't be long. That's not easy. to say, oh, this is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
And that holds them accountable, but I didn't do it with that. I did not have, and I think that's where there wasn't the accountability with the discourse. They had the accountable talk, but they weren't using it because they didn't have to respond to it in any way. You know.
But I think going back to your question, your facilitation of the lesson I thought was beautiful, and not only like you said, like you were teaching them real life things like how to interact with people and be respectful, and it's just I think it was a lesson that didn't lend itself to certain higher level questionings, But going to your question, I think you facilitated it to the absolute extreme that it could be facilitated and really brought out from the kids as much as you could in both science and just being a good person in the classroom. I thought the modeling was beautiful, and
I think it's hard with the program that we have to look and go, okay, I got to teach this at this time because I have to teach this because I'm told to teach this because that teacher needs this time. We're in the middle of park, so you can't take those days.
Yeah.
And,
Right,
and,
so
and I
that's
got to
the
get this
reality
done
of
because
it.
I have vacation. It's like, well, I guess it's this lesson. So you do what you can with that, but isn't that what we do with everything?
Yes.
And you can't do everything with it, but I still feel like, just thinking about it made a difference.
So did anyone else want to connect with the research? Otherwise, we could look at the student work, which I think we're all pretty psyched about. Yes.
So I'll share with you, besides the
Oh, let me
games,
just set the timer for
which
this.
she'll say, this was the actual project details. I've also, there are things I made mistakes on. I'm looking at, my spelling errors for next year. What I generally do is put whatever I have in here and keep it in plastic with whatever changes I want to make, provided that I'm doing it again. I had some really serious scheduling issues with this whole project lesson.
Sorry, can I just jump in? I just want to read off the first sentence here, which says, "You have been chosen to help construct the Children's Museum exhibit on the cell." I think framing it like that is kind of awesome. Not like this project must demonstrate knowledge of the cell. I think that's right there is the start of why we see so many creative projects. That's nice.
Thanks. And one of the other things is that I've continuously showed them, look this is the fancy words of what you're learning. So this is straight off the standard. And I let them know that these are the things I'm supposed to do. If it makes no sense to you, that's okay. I'm going to make it make sense to you.
Is that NGSS? Is that the draft
Yes.
standards?
Yeah. And this is the whole part of it. That's the whole thing on there. And I've given them checklists. This is the backside where they had decisions to start their project. So the things they had to think of. And it's almost a question format, like, materials I'm going to need are, that they have to think about on that. And there's their grading rubric to follow with. The sheet that...
This is what they were filling out as they walked around, right?
This is the sheet they're filling out. This is their grading rubric that they had to do. So once their project was done, they had to provide evidence. This is their CER form that they had for this. They had to provide evidence of all the words they used and all their concepts, the ones that are required, the types required, and then they had to give themselves a score here. So this is all their score sheets.
What was the time frame, Cheri?
From the beginning of the project to the end, they had 2 weeks.
At home, in school, both.
Yes, and it's very
Which
specified.
one? At home or in school?
Both.
Oh,
So
both,
here's,
okay.
it tells them specifically what days they had an early release day, they had testing days. So half a class on one day, a full class, a few nights, 2 weeks working on it. So they got 2.5 classes and 3 nights that they could work on it.
They did a lot for that time.
Yeah, and this is the most amazing thing, okay? I have to say, I did not have one child not arrive with their project on time.
That's
out of
awesome.
90 kids. And
Says a lot.
I
That does say a
had
lot.
2 children who are late with almost everything, like those homeroom forms, that I gave them credit for a day early, and they said, how much credit? And I said, I don't know, we'll see. I didn't even tell them, which always blows a kid away. It's like, well, she's not telling us how much credit. But 2 kids who typically late do it a day early. So I felt good about that they were invested. This is the form that they had to fill out, and I kind of played with the design and making the forms out. Yeah.
Thanks.
So the
Oh, I love
journal-
that selfie.
Yeah, that's their own. They had to do their own first grade to project, and they had it for each of the projects, say what's the best question and why. They didn't do a lot of the whys, they just put the question in. What's the best part of the project and why? Suggestions for improvement and why, and a question to think about cells related to the project. So I really like the number 4 is the one that I really enjoyed reading, because that has them thinking outside the box, even though it's in the box, in terms of, what other thoughts and ideas. And they had to do one of each type and then pick another one that they liked. And in some classes I had more of one or another. The neat part is they were really mad that they couldn't see the other ones till June. And I asked if anybody didn't want theirs displayed to let me know. And I asked several times and nobody said they didn't want theirs displayed. So
Isn't that great?
that was cool.
So they were very proud.
Yeah. And that's about, I guess you can look.
I have some kids who would not be able to write in these squares,
Yeah.
but that's just their
Well,
particular.
Here's one. He barely did it. This is a particular class that I have a hard time sitting down,
Yeah.
producing
Yeah.
work. Their homework, they have at the beginning of the year, it was 6 kids' names on the board all the time. So it's a big deal that they're actually producing work, let alone finally getting some quality in there. But this one's funny.
But I mean, him is just he is MS, so he just really couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it. He'd have someone do it for him probably. But it's a cool idea. I like how you use each side of the square to have a different thing done.
Do you do this a lot? Do you use this format a lot?
No, I do blocks, I do circles, I try to keep it away from standard lines. I do a lot of a lot of drawings. That was the first time I used that format. We were, talking about building blocks and how we can connect it. And they wanted to make blocks, but I just didn't have enough time to make cubes with them.
Do you have the page for Accountable Talk?
Yes.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and you know what? I've got a couple of them.
Did you
Here's the
make
pretty
it, or-
objectives that I have for this quarter, by the way. I might even have extras in here because I just pulled out the folder. Kids all got Accountable Talk slips like this at the beginning of the year.
Are you the only one that does this, or is this a school-wide thing?
No, it's not a school-wide thing. It's something that was a skill, technique that was presented to us that you might want to use it. And there's another teacher on my team who has the Accountable Talks and posts it, and the SPED teacher, she uses it quite a bit.
Are these extras? Could I have a copy of this?
Yeah, there's not, if there's a
see.
second, you can have everything but one, so yeah. Let's see.
Great, I like this.
This is cool.
But so they're in their little, I have a little bin that has stuff in it in the middle of the table.
So what did you do with these?
So what we're going to do with them is we're gonna eventually one day cut them out and have them up to display with the projects during the showcase. But we also, the questions that are in the parking lot are over there. We looked at some, and if I have extra time, what I usually do is, sometimes when I have extra time, like at the end of a field trip or a special presentation, and you get 10 minutes with your kids in the classroom with nothing set and scheduled, I take out, what questions do we have? So I will take some of the questions. Sometimes I just ask them. I have books. I'll say, let's check this book out. And I just kind of make it kind of an open forum. And so we'll use some of the questions on that. They like that, you know. There's lots of things I don't get to talk about that I know, and I learn a lot from them in that process. I'm always like finding out interesting things from them as well.
There's a cool question on here. Why are the ribosomes so small when their function is so big?
Yeah.
There's one, the girl who did the website, this one I think right here, which
When
it's
she was
like
talking about
halfway-
it.
When she's talking about her, she was like, we felt that students didn't understand this, and
Yeah.
so this is
Yeah.
what we did. It's like, it's so funny.
Yeah.
And you know what was really that I thought was cool is they were at the two of the kids in this class and in some of the others, they had students assess them at the end on their website and their presentation.
Yeah,
What could we
I saw
do?
that. That's
So
cool.
they were actually asking for feedback back, and I'm like, yeah, now you're getting it, because I'm getting to the point where it's like self-assessment, you know, self-assessment a lot, because I want them to not ask me, is this good enough? Is it your best work?
Am I done? Yeah.
You know,
Do
is
they,
this okay?
Do they get to see other people's work?
Yeah, so these will be posted up later on, but they got to share with each other. They learn a lot from each other. And at this point, I tell them on fourth quarter, I like to transition to be your coach as opposed to your teacher. And so they're starting to get the point where they're learning on their own and I'm just guiding them.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm looking at this student's things that they like versus some of the others, and I thought it'd be like, you know, good for them to see each other's work.
Sorry, you gotta share this.
I have 4 kids in there that are in Read 180, so they're getting assistance for reading. Probably half dozen that have transitioned out of ELL support.
So I'm gonna
and
assume this
3
is
504
not
kids.
ELL, it's based on the name. Eliana.
Yeah.
Right. So this is one of the improvements, right? So like on the game it says there should be no improvement. It is perfect. Just a formal way to put that.
Yeah.
This cracks me up.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so you
Can we
go
look at the
play.
projects?
Go play.
Oh yeah. I'm
There's
just gonna turn the
quite
video
a
camera on.
variety, just as you can see here, and the kids in the classroom there. And some of them really did a good job in
Oh,
asking
look how cute
questions.
this is. Pull. Oh, adorable.
So they took old board games and like covered them up and put new tops on them?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And some did, some didn't.
This one is a lot of work. Every page is a different organ now, or a different kind of organism now, or
That's amazing to do that in 2 weeks.
here's one that you quiz yourself and then
Nice.
I mean just.
And this was your first year, so you had no examples to show the kids.
Correct. I hate that.
I just lost a game piece.
Look at this.
Anyone
I
see it?
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I do.
The village was really cool, the analogy village, they have to put it up there and then take it down. And this is another one I really liked.
Oh,
Yeah, I was
saw
seeing that.
one.
Yeah.
They have to put it together.
Now,
That was one of the
did they
questions.
cut the styrofoam at home?
Yeah.
Because I've cut styrofoam and like I can't cut styrofoam well enough.
Inside the animal awaits you.
That's not function.
Did you have other examples though of different projects that have this format where it says like pull me or pull up?
No, I verbally told them, but
Oh,
they
because
had
this is
done,
the second
they had
one, it's so
previously
cute.
done posters. They had to do posters back at the, probably October, November, where, and I'm thinking our tape is, somebody turned the camera on, great.
Right, it's probably got none of us on
We
camera.
had to do posters that had to be 3D in some way. So part of their 3D posters was they could add things on or pull or do something.
You're a big fan of Adventure Time?
What is
This
it?
student
You
obviously
know,
is.
yes.
What is it?
This is Jake from Adventure Time.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, my son's older.
Yeah, that one didn't put anything together, but used a concept that they had before, and I thought it was really cute. This is a child that doesn't do any work typically, but because he got to play with this and have it move around to answer the questions, he was like, oh, excited. I was like, that's what it takes, okay. And I liked this one said, use your nucleus. This is cute. When you think about, like, they did analogies with this, they kind of compared it to like packages and stuff. That's cool.
The Cambridge Science Carnival, which was like the Saturday, the first Saturday break, they had an inflatable cell that you walked through.
Ah, how
It was
cool.
amazing.
I'm so bummed I didn't get to go to that. Did you go? It was awesome.
I went to one day of it. I brought my kids, but it was fun. So it's always April vacation?
Yeah, so that was
Okay.
the
Yeah, look at
first
these
Saturday
little
break.
things. Just so creative. This is like, you call that scrapbooking, but with cells. Yeah.
These are
3D, it's like a
amazing.
pop-up scrap.
Yeah. Well, the hardcore is always do it pretty.
So what's this over here?
So this was they had a, look at that. This was some of their questions that they thought was great. That was the journal part beforehand. No, this was part of the paper they had. Here's the journal thing where I said, think about your projects, what you, what did I say to do, put sentence. So they get a writing, my students, when you ask me, do I only teach science? I do have, after lunch every day, a 20 to 30 minute, what's called writing block. And it's built in for children who need services to be able to leave the class and go to get some services. So we have writing across the curriculum. So I just have to do something that's related to what I'm doing, but can't hurt children who can't be there for that time. You got that?
Yeah.
So that gives me some creativity in what I do with kids sometimes as extras. So this was where they had to think about their project. This was for review beforehand. Here's another classes. So I have to pull that.
What a good idea, the line block.
Mars is supposedly a reading block, but has morphed from that, at least in
Yeah.
our school it has.
I wish it was consistent because it's frustrating when kids come in during SSR and will say, oh, can I have the homework because it's SSR? I'm like, no, because you can't do homework during SSR.
Well, yeah, it is
I'm like,
inconsistent.
it's not supposed to be that, so.
And I do find that it was funny during the tests, excuse me, the testing. When they were done, they could read a book of their choice. How many children did not bring in their own books and just went to my library to get books? Now I rotate my books out of the library because I have so many, I can only put so many out. And so I've got like 5 boxes of books and only 1 box goes on the display and is available for them. So they know that those books are only there for a certain period of time too. They're like, can you take that book out again? When they find some. But they're very much related and it's amazing how many kids said, oh, well, I'm going to use one of your books. And they do. They took a couple of books and they were like happy to be reading nonfiction books that they were learning from on science after their testing rather than their own pleasure books, which I would think they would want to do. Or they have to read for ELA. I'm thinking, don't you want to read for ELA and get some of that reading time done? No, that was their pleasure. So it was pretty cool.
These came out great.
Yeah, really cool.
Okay, so now everyone is going to share what they learned.
I'm so dead right now. I had to refocus myself.
Sleep is important.
I think for me, it just shows me that there's still so much I have to learn about this and that some lessons will be better suited for, and I think it goes back to just talking about all the NGSS, how it's not a checklist and some lessons will go over this and this and this and other lessons will use these strategies and I think just keeping that in the back of our mind that not trying to force something and just kind of going with the natural flow of what we do and looking and seeing which ones fit with each lesson because you clearly can't do everything every lesson.
I mean, I look at this and And I'm trying to think of like, well, how would I use questions in my cell unit? And you're right, like they're like when I'm videotaping something for here, I'm already saying, oh, I don't want to do that. Because I'm lucky that I teach something in 8th grade, so at least I've got sort of 2 different things. So it's like, oh, I won't do that. I'll do this over here. And like, I don't know how I do this in cells, and I think it's something where I just like ideally like you're having questioning in every unit. So it's just something that like I want to reflect and think of like how I want to bring that to cells, and I don't think there's an easy answer. It's so tough with some unit. I mean, some units questioning goes like so easy with, and there's some that just it's.
But for this one, modeling is awesome. Like, how would you even do it without modeling? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so certain things
Gotta
will
model.
fit
Right.
better.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when they did the webinar, they talked about the human body systems, and they brought it down to the cellular level, because they talked about, well, how do cells selectively allow some things in and not other things? Like, what is it's going on? So they brought it down to, but they brought it from like a big picture down to these, like, following up with more questions, and this led to more questions, which led to like, you know, it was interesting how they did it. They talked about the human body system, because I teach that. I was like paying really specific attention to that. Like, it was all about how does your body get the energy to do the things that you do? And then like all the questions that led off from that to try to figure out the answer to that one main question.
But that was more systems, and I think that would be a lot easier than cells.
True, but it brought it down to cells. I mean, I guess if you do cells as a
Or-
standalone,
right.
it's a little bit different.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
if you did
yeah.
cell process, it would be easier.
Right.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
different, you know.
But like you said, like just this in isolation, though, I think.
Well, and
It's
it's,
challenging.
especially with like the new Massachusetts draft standards, like plate tectonics is in there. But in 6th grade, basically 6th grade the standard is
They cut it up.
what's the evidence of plate tectonics, and 7th grade is sort of like, well, something happened fast, something happened slow. 8th grade it's
The mechanism.
the mechanism. So like if your question 6th grade is like, well, but how does that work? You can't answer it till 8th grade. I mean, like if you're sticking with the standards, and like that's dumb. If you really want these practices to happen, like you've really got to.
They've cut up the
It's
content.
so hard. I find that these standards are so hard to explain simply where students can understand them, because there's so much background that they need that they don't have for an understanding. That's difficult.
Yeah, I feel like that I learned with this questioning piece that it's difficult for students to ask good questions, and that it's a process. Like, you have to start off and model it, and I'm not saying they can't. That's not what I mean at all. But I mean that it's you have to work at it, just like anything else. Like, I do something every year where they have to come up with their own question. And it has to be one that they have to be able to collect data on, and they do their own science fair project, and they do a poster. And so we start off with asking good questions, and what is a good question, and like what's a research question versus a data, when you can find data. And so like that actually is so hard for them. Like, it's even like any question you want, something you're just interested in. And some kids are like, and like they go back to the standard. What happens if I water a plant with Coke and I water a plant with water? And like, they go back to that because it's familiar and it's easy. But to like ask those questions in their everyday life and to really research something, it's hard.
It's funny because I hope this is okay, sidetrack, but I had my grandson who's 3. How? Why? How? And I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
Like, somewhere along the line, as kids get older, they, what's the answer to that? They don't want to know the whole process of how and why. They just want that finite answer that's done.
Well, that says something either about our educational system.
Exactly. That's because
It
I
says
think a
something
lot of
about-
the standardized tests that we're just inundating the kids with.
Yeah. Thing I learned is how important what you focus on really makes a difference with the kids. Like, I didn't focus on their interactions. I expected it to happen more naturally in the exploration, and because they had to fill out paper with the questions and assess the projects, they didn't always engage in that conversation that I wanted them to. But I don't usually have that problem when I have them have to write that something as evidence of that conversation. And I didn't require them to do something as evidence of that conversation, so it didn't happen in the way that I would have liked it to. But then again, it's how much can you ask them to do at a given time?
Exactly.
And this time with my project, I had the students evaluate themselves and how they worked collaboratively with each other, and again, providing evidence that they were doing that. And that was so much helpful in having the groups work together when they realized that they would be grading and I would be grading that work every single day, not just as like a general group thing, but every single day, and that would go towards it. That helped, I felt, like the collaborative process, knowing that this was something that was an expectation and this is what I was looking for. So you're right, like what you focus on can make a big difference, and having those expectations really clear helps.
Okay, I think we did very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.